Good morning and welcome to Rising. We've got another great show for you today. How are you, Lindsay? Nice to see you.
Nice to see you as always. I'm not a fan of like the dreary days. I do like the winter.
Dreary here in DC?
Yeah, no,
it's cold.
It's dreary because the government shut down. But other than that, it's very cold, and you know, I like the sun out.
I know my scooter season is just about at an end. I did scooter here yesterday into my other office, and it was windy and it was cold, and I was like freezing the whole way.
Do you have like a full situation, like face mask?
I have earmuffs. I have gloves. You know, I bundle up, but I'm not a fan of cold weather.
Yeah, me either. Coming up on Rising, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth announced that the U.S. has launched more strikes on alleged drug-carrying boats, but the president of Mexico is expressing concern.
Plus, the GOP-led House Oversight Committee released a report on former President Biden, concluding that his AutoPen actions should be held null and void.
And the state of Texas is suing the makers of Tylenol, accusing them of knowingly withholding alleged risks of ADHD and autism. But first, as always, Robby, what's on your radar?
Well, Zohran Mamdani is less than a week away from his likely victory in the New York City mayoral race, in which he is widely expected to defeat challengers Andrew Cuomo and Curtis Sliwa. That means it's long past time to scrutinize the kind of mayor that Mamdani will be. And make no mistake, despite his pleasing and friendly demeanor, this is a man with a very radical agenda and extremist views. Now, some criticisms of Mamdani have focused on his identity. He's a Ugandan immigrant and a Muslim, and leans very heavily into his Muslim identity. In fact, he recently suggested that combating Islamophobia in New York City was a very serious concern of his, and he even suggested that a relative of his aunt had stopped riding the subway after 9/11 because she feared Islamophobia. Take a listen.
I want to speak to the memory of my aunt. Who stopped taking the subway after September 11th because she did not feel safe in her hijab.
Now, when some commentators pointed out that Mamdani has no such aunt, he clarified that he was referring to some other relative, a cousin of his father. Now, personally, I don't think that's a very important difference, whether it was an aunt or a second cousin, and obviously I agree with Mamdani that no one should feel bullied or unsafe for being Muslim or for being Christian or Jewish or Black or gay or Asian or Hispanic or for any other reason. Other people should be treated well. I do, however, think it's a bit tone-deaf to imply perhaps indirectly that what was so bad about 9/11 was how it made Mamdani's father's cousin feel. He has every right to tell the anecdote, and I don't have enough information to second-guess it, though I will point out that President George W. Bush went out of his way to encourage the nation not to blame 9/11 on peaceful Muslims or Muslim Americans who felt the loss on 9/11 just as keenly as the rest of us. Now, if there's a resentment felt by Americans toward Muslims, that resentment should be countered. It should be discouraged. It should be confronted. Of course, that some who give power to that resentment are people like Zohran's father, Mahmoud Mamdani. Mahmoud Mamdani was twice exiled by his native Uganda and was taken in by where else? The United States of America. Yet here's how he feels about the U.S. This clip went viral on X for good reason.
Abraham Lincoln generalized the solution of reservations. They herded American Indians into separate territories. For the Nazis, this was the inspiration. Hitler realized two things. One, that genocide was doable.
So Zohran Mamdani's father believes that one of America's most beloved leaders, Abraham Lincoln, was the inspiration for Adolf Hitler's brutal genocide. Does Zohran share his father's views? Does he harbor this level of contempt for his adoptive country? I'd like to know. Maybe New York voters would as well. In any case, there's no denying that Zohran Mamdani is a radical and an extremist, and I'm not talking about his religious beliefs. I'm talking about his support for socialism, his support for abolishing the police, his support for increasing the tax rate to 52%, half your income, more than half, should be confiscated by the government, in his view. Well, that's the real extremism, no pretending otherwise there.
So I thought your radar was really thoughtful because you obviously don't like Mamdani's stances on policy, and I think it's important that you pointed out that President Bush did decry everybody that tried to attach this to all Muslims. But
And if any Muslim people were made to feel uncomfortable, I think that's terrible, and that was wrong.
And that's not, I want to point out and elaborate on that point, because we agree upon it.
Yeah.
But it's important not to pretend that just because the president gave a speech at that time in 2001, that the bigotry somehow went away. There was a 17-fold increase on hate crimes in Muslims just in the year from 2000 to 2001 alone. And there was also, it rose by 500% between 2000 to 2009 in 9 years. And so Muslims increased attacks, the same way we talk about anti-Semitism rising in this country and such a huge issue. We should acknowledge that there was a dramatic increase over the years that followed. And so Mamdani, as a New Yorker, as somebody he's living and breathing that experience, wants to make sure that we don't have some of those same things in place that make his community feel
I
othered.
think organizations that track those statistics, when I've looked at them closely, I've often come away underimpressed, or in fact feeling gaslighted by such organizations that take in money when they make it look like hate is getting worse, and use very interesting counting systems to tally hate crimes. Often,
so that's on all sides of the aisle, even when the president is going after
By the way,
colleges.
not at all. I don't mean that specific to this category. I mean, that's true of anti-Semitism. It's true of a number of categories that when you try to look more closely at what gets counted as a hate crime, it gets more confusing. That's neither here nor there, but is part of my overall skepticism of this I think victimhood narrative.
Something that raised my eyebrow also is that according to the ACLU, at least starting at 2002, for the decade following, the New York City Police Department's Intelligence Division engaged in religious profiling of suspicious Muslims in New York City. And so we both talk about that. Tracking people simply because of what they look like is always a problem for both. I think we've agreed on that. And keeping these databases, it makes people uncomfortable and also can cause issues. Me and you have talked about that in a variety of ways.
Right.
When it touches on many people of many communities, even politicians.
Right.
You had an entire, I think, radar about the government officials being tracked.
Tone deaf to emphasize that as the principal harm of 9/11 in his remarks?
No, I think that you can't police what Muslim people could say how they feel about that experience and what happened after. I think it's important to say that two things can be true at once. The attacks on 9/11 were dramatic and horrible, and I think that we should acknowledge that it was the worst terrorist attack in our country's history. But also, Muslim people are allowed to feel the way they feel if things were happening to them after that made them feel like they were the perpetrators when they were simply living American lives in the U.S. and just existing, and made to feel ostracized because of an incident that had nothing to do with them. I think that is a fair point that he's making. I also think when you have a parent and say, look at what your dad said, like, this is a grown man. We know that a parent is allowed to feel how they feel, and a grown adult man is allowed to feel how he feels. And so you can't stop, and I can't stop. We talked about our grandmothers yesterday from saying anything on social media. Many things I disagree with, agree with. Colin, I told you, he and I share different political views. We live together. I love him. It doesn't matter. The point is we can sit there and have dialogue. Doesn't mean that he directly affects everything I think or say, or if I was running for politics, if I need to echo what he thinks, right?
Well, that's fine. But I mean, his father is a globally recognized leading scholar of colonialist thought and progressive thought. He raised him. He's not responsible for those. Oh my God, we lost.
we lost our background, but
goodness.
we can still chat about this.
He's not responsible for what his father thinks, obviously, and he doesn't have to necessarily share it. But I don't. It stuck out to me.
And my biggest concern about this whole thing is because you're very critical of Mamdani, and so are all Republicans, and that's fine and fair criticism. But I noticed that this whole thing is a real sleight of hand to me. When I watch people just constantly criticize what he is doing, when I watch Cuomo go on podcasts with conservative podcasters and say, oh yeah, he probably would be laughing or, chuckling about 9/11 and things that just throw off from the point of policy, that's disturbing to me. Because now we're a week out from the election, and all I hear people doing is criticizing what Mamdani's saying, but not answering to the real questions that people have about housing, about affordability in New York, and all the things that he's speaking to. And even if you think his ideas are pie in the sky, he's speaking to them. And so I'd like to see Sliwa, I'd like to see Cuomo talking more about what they would do differently, even though they're likely going to lose, rather than just trying to tear him down, because he has a plan. And we know that when people have a plan, that usually energizes folks to get out and vote. Mm-hmm. I don't know. So I think that they could try to change their strategy here.
Well, we'll see. Next up, a new report from the House Oversight Committee argues that Joe Biden's presidential pardons should be rendered null and void. Coming up, what this report says about the administration's use of the auto pen.